very much for your introduction, Professor Yui. Okay, I will skip many introductory parts because Jean-Marie has already talked about them. After his French accent, you will have to hear my Italian accent, so I'm sorry. And I also want to state that that obscure photo that Jean-Marie recuperated from the web of me, it's from 2002, an epoch when I also really had hair. First of all, let me spend some words on the methodological aspects of this second survey. As you know, we built two questionnaires, one for respondents who declared to be manga readers and one for respondents who declared not to read manga. Okay. The questionnaire for readers was significantly longer than the questionnaire for non-readers, but the questions in the latter were also included in the format. This way, of course, we were able to carry out our comparative analysis. These are just some little data so that you can see, in addition to what Jean-Marie showed us. I will here display my very initial statistical tests driven by a set of very basic research questions. These research questions will deserve, of course, an advanced multivariate analysis, but in any ideal path of statistical investigation, the first step is, of course, the presentation of the overall scenario. The basic questions I am talking about are the following. What are the images of manga among non-readers? What are the differences in the images of Japan among manga readers and non-readers? And as cumulative questions, can we observe specific trends related to such images, and in correlation to which main socio-demographical independent variables? Today, the independent variables I'm referring to are, as you can easily imagine, gender and age cohorts. And in this initial phase of analysis, the first factor by which the images of Japan may co-vary, which we had to analyze in a chronological order, had to be that of being versus not being a manga reader. And it was observed that the reading of manga has an impact on the perception of Japan among readers, whereas, as it seems, common stereotypes on Japan, as we have seen, are still very popular among non-readers. But of course, we also had to see how this variable varies according to nationality. France and Italy are similar on an international perspective, if seen from Japan, but quite different for their experience and culture when seen from a European perspective. And our data in this first phase are leading to us to this direction. Yes, I have to specify that I'm referring this presentation to a comparison between Italy and France because they are the national samples that we have completed at this moment, completed to input into the statistics software. So to explore these issues, the question I presented two sets of questions. A battery asking several questions on different concepts and dimensions in order to define the opinions of manga in Japan, and open questions asking three definitions on manga in Japan. I will focus today on the open questions. This was the most significant novelty in the questionnaires of the second phase, and required the classification and codification of each single word written by respondents. I created a set of dimensions for both the categories Japan and manga in accord with Jean-Marie. The words have been put and codified into each one of these dimensions according to their meaning. The list of words count about 170 words for the Japan list and 150 words for the manga list. The request of writing 3 words on manga was made only in the questionnaire for non-readers. We were interested the most in what non-readers think of manga and what concepts do they associate manga with. The same question regarding manga readers seemed to us, at least to me, less interesting at this time. The dimensions related to the images of manga, which I have operationalized, are 7, and they have been created ex post. That is, after a careful study of the words emerged in the survey. These, as you see, are the 7 thematic families which were operationalized from the analysis of the free world. I say 7 because for the last one, ideas and imagery coming from manga, they are positive, neutral, and negative. And the conceptual dimensions for the images of Japan, originally classified by Jean-Marie Guissou, were 16, but for this paper I have furtherly synthesized and operationalized them into 6. And in this case, the dimensions were created ex ante, that is, on the basis of our starting hypothesis. Although the questionnaires we disseminated ask many more questions, and although the displaying of these many questions virtually allow a wide range of statistical operations, we believe that the best starting point in the present context is to begin displaying data about these 2 issues. Before the presentation of some of this new information, I would like to point out how the elements should go into the picture, in accord with the structural goals of this conference and the project behind it. The state of Japanese popular culture in Europe and images of Japan among people and in the mainstream media. Not to mention a wide set of theoretical and methodological issues and a diversified multidisciplinary international literature which constitute the ground of our work. Of course, I won't be able to approach these topics in this paper, but I want to at least mention them, underlining that they were and are part of our project. So, let's go to the first 3 tables about manga. I hope, yes, it's big enough. As you see in this first table, the most frequent concepts and words related to manga deal with one category, manga as a bridge to other words seen under a descriptive light. Following, there are the definitions pertaining to manga as a cauldron of linguistic features, genres, characters, and authors. I hope you have read it. So I will skip to table 2. Okay. The crossing of, for the table 2, the crossing of these indexes meaning a composite variable composed of simple variables. So sorry, I will avoid statistical jargon. Anyway, the crossing of these indexes with the gender variable does not show strong changes in the overall picture. We can just observe that women tend more than men to include manga in the framework of imagery and languages, while men in that of genres, characters, and authors. The situations does not vary at all when the independent variable used is age. At the growing of the age, there is a descending tendency to consider manga in terms of genres, characters, and authors. The same tendency is noticed about themes concerning the social debate on manga. Furthermore, in this third cross table, very interesting is the response of adults and old adults about manga's languages and imagery. These 2 subgroups more often recognize manga's nature as a visual language and tend to assign to it neutral or positive imaginative features. I hope you had an energetic drink of these numbers. The core of this first outlook, anyway, is the issue about what do respondents think of Japan. For what concerns this topic, the independent variables to be checked in this earlier phase were, of course, and again, gender and age groups. Here, the most interesting and relevant difference is among males and females in the non-reader sample, for what concerns Japan seen as a classic and exotic place. 21% of men and 55% of women. It is a correlation which works, as also stated by a fairly good value of the Pearson's p-squared, that is the coefficient of correlation, a value which measures the significance of a correlation between two variables. So, let us also notice, for the sake of simplicity, I won't show here the related cross tables, that there are some relevant differences between Italy and France for what concerns the images of Japan, both in general and according to gender. First of all, in Italy, the dominant image of Japan is the classic exotic one, 45% versus 19% of the pop cultural framing. While in France, the dominant image is the pop cultural one, 47% versus 36% of the classic exotic framing. Within the national samples, this is the situation. In Italy, the pop cultural framing is selected by 22% of men and 12% of women, while in France by 37% of men and 35% of women. The classic exotic framing is selected in Italy by 44% of men and 45% of women, in France by 28% of men and 42% of women. This means that in France, and slightly in Italy, women frame Japan more as a classic and exotic culture than men. And while in France there is a fair balance between genders for what concerns the pop cultural framing, in Italy almost the double of men than women see Japan in its pop cultural features. The other relevant framing, Japan seen in war and crisis, shows that men are more inclined to see Japan this way. In Italy, 8.5% males, just 3.7% females. In France, 10 men and 6 women. Finally, the thematic areas in which Japan is framed according to the variable age. I'm sorry I didn't put in the presentation tab table 5, but you have it in the paper. As we can notice, the counterposition Japan framed as a pop culture versus Japan framed as a classic and exotic culture is relevantly correlated to the age of manga readers from childhood to adult life. At the growing of the age, respondents see Japan's culture less as a pop culture and more as a traditional culture and an exotic place. Non-readers tend, rather, to see Japan mostly in a traditional and exotic fashion. In this case, it appears already from these simple statistics tests how the reading of manga may influence the framing of Japan between the two poles, pop traditional. The other dimensions appear marginal and also show no particular correlational linearity. I use the verb may because in this phase of the research we are exploring and observing data with descriptive means, and we are not yet at the point that we use analysis for explicative goals. There are at least two last observations which here do not need any further cross-study. First remark, both in France and Italy, apart from some small exceptions in the values, we could notice comparable trends in the three main framings of Japan: pop culture, classic culture, war and crisis. According to the age group, at the growing of the age, the tendency to describe Japan in terms of pop culture and in terms of war events decreases. On the contrary, the classic exotic framing increases. You have in the paper note number 7 with all the percentage. The second remark is a comment about the tendencies according to the education variable. The main tendency in this case resulted in privileging an image of manga as a cauldron of a neutral kind of imagery and ideas. At the growing of the study title,